Hello there, BookTube. How are you doing? Happy Poetry Thursday and happy Thanksgiving, if that's something that you're celebrating where you are. This week I thought we'd say goodbye for a while to Ted Hughes and The Hawk and the Rain. This was the first book that me and David Wiley have been reading as part of our poetry book club, and we finished it yesterday. And it's been really good. So I thought I'd just share my thoughts on the collection as a whole before reading one last Ted Hughes poem for a while, and then read a poem by someone else for a change. And so as a whole, yeah, it's a very impressive poetry collection. It has its highs and it has a few valleys in it, but yeah, it's a very impressive collection. You only have to read maybe the first 2 or 3 poems to get the impression that Ted Hughes, even in this early stage, even in his first poetry collection, has a very clear idea of his voice, of his preoccupations, of the images of certain words, certain ideas that he wants to bring up. There's the repetition of the word horizons quite a lot, particularly in this poetry collection. I think he does repeat it a fair bit in his career. I think he said that if, when he died and someone took the brain out of his head and cut it for a cross section, the word horizons would be singed in there. I think because he grew up in a valley, and he would look up to this kind of cliff face and see the sun setting under it or behind it, and so an idea of a kind of horizon was something that was very, very deep in him, and I think a longing for a kind of freedom is kind of in there in the poetry. I think particularly expressed in the second poem in the collection called The Jaguar. But really, I think one of the main themes of the collection is violence. Maybe violence between the natural world or the elemental world and our world, how we're kind of almost incompatible. That kind of civilized humanity is almost incompatible with the natural world and with the elemental world. And then there's also, it kind of creeps in, particularly later in the collection, the violence that humans show to each other, particularly in war, and in the First World War, but also in other ways. Particularly, I mean, a standout poem is the last poem, The Martyrdom of Bishop Farrar, which is about, I think actually, a very distant relative, an ancestor of Hughes, who was burned at the stake for heresy under the reign of Queen Mary. And so yeah, it's very interesting, very impressive first collection. As I said, a few valleys, a few moments where maybe he feels like he's overreaching. I guess it is his first poetry collection, and all poets maybe in their first poetry collection are maybe testing the waters a bit, experimenting a bit, trying to see what works for them. And some do it more than others. Ted Hughes doesn't do it that much, but there are a few moments where it feels, you can feel he's doing that a little bit. But yeah, very, very, very impressive. So I thought I'd just share one last Ted Hughes poem, at least for a while. And this is another one of the standouts for me, and it's called The Man Seeking Experience Enquires His Way of a Drop of Water. And that's basically it. The first 4 stanzas of the poem is just a man, asking this drop of water, which is, has evaporated, and then, I suppose, what's the right word? Not condensed, but has rained down and then evaporated and rained down over and over and over again, asking it, if you've been here for so long, what can you tell me? And then at the end of the poem, we kind of get a bit of an answer. So, the man seeking experience inquires his way of a drop of water. This water droplet, charity of the air, out of the watched blue immensity, where are the angels? Out of the draught in the door, the Tuscarora, the cloud, the cup of tea, the sweating victor and the decaying dead bird. This droplet has travelled far and studied hard. Now clings on the cream paint of our kitchen wall. Aged eye, this without heart's head nerve lens, which saw the first and earth-centering jewel spark upon darkness, behemoth bulk and lumber out of the instant flash, a man's hand hoist him upright, still hangs clear and round. Having studied a journey in the high cathedral brain, the mole's ear, the fish's ice, the abattoir of the tiger's artery, the slum of the dog's bowel, and there is no place his bright look has not bettered, and problem none, but he has brought it to solution. Venerable elder, let us learn of you. Read us a lesson, a plain lesson, how experience has worn or made you anew, that on this humble kitchen wall hang now, O dew that condensed of the breath of the word on the mirror of the syllable of the word. So he spoke, aloud, grandly, then stood for an answer, knowing his own nature all droplet kin, sisters and brothers of lymph and blood, listened for himself to speak for the drop's self. This droplet was clear, simple water still. It no more responded than the hour-old child does to a finger toy or coy baby talk, but who lies long, long and frowningly, unconscious under the shock of its own quick after that first alone in creation cry, when into the mesh of sense, out of the dark, blundered the world-shouldering monstrous I. So there we go, that's a bit of Ted Hughes. We'll put him down for a while now, and just before I leave, I thought I'd share a bit of Emily Dickinson, who, like Ted Hughes actually, is one of those first poets who got me excited about reading poetry. So in a way, kind of appropriate maybe for Thanksgiving. And this is a poem by Emily Dickinson that stood out to me a bit earlier this year, and it's called I Dwell in Possibility. I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, more numerous of windows, superior for doors, of chambers as the cedars, impregnable of eye, and for an everlasting roof, the gambrels of the sky, of visitors the fairest, for occupation this, the spreading wide my narrow hands, to gather paradise. So there we have it, that's Poetry Thursday for this week. I'll probably see you again, hopefully. Hopefully not too long, in another video. I hope you're doing well. Take care.